Welcome back to Love, Life, and Legacy, the podcast dedicated to helping you navigate these hypersexualized times. Now, today we're going to do another episode featuring the 24-hour summit that we did. This one is Andi Pock interviewing Phillip Schanker. And if you know Phillip Schanker, he's been a multiple time guest on our podcast. This is his third time appearing. And he's sensational. He just really knows his stuff. And by stuff, I mean pretty much anything, everything. I don't know. I haven't really heard him dumbfounded on any topic, but especially in the area of therapy and understanding, peeling back the layers of what is addiction, what is trauma. He's kind of like our go-to guy often to understand the man behind the man, behind the man, behind the man. And there's no, he's just one of those good old reliable stalwarts of knowledge to pull from. So in this episode, they peel back what is the real root cause of addiction, and really important to understand, because most of us, somewhere along the way, we get distracted and we start focusing on our habits, and we forget that the reason we settle for certain habits is because we have some internal dialogue that we don't even hear that's going on behind the scenes that's dictating most of our lives. So please listen up, take notes, either mentally, emotionally, or substantially on a piece of paper, if you do that kind of thing. And tune in for Andi Pock interviewing Phillip Schanker. Let's go.
Our topic for today is, could porn just be seen as the symptom? Why is it just a symptom? And what are the underlying roots, discussing the roots of unwanted behaviors, like sexual behaviors, like porn. And so why this topic came up for me in preparation for this session is because I was in High Noon for a couple of years. And at one point, I decided to go a little bit deeper and seek a little bit more help. And so I started a therapist. Now a friend of mine is somebody who I still regard as my mentor. And his name is Phillip Schanker, and he's been helping lots of people in healing from their past experiences and their current situation, preparing for whatever goal they have in mind, whether that's long-term marriage, the blessing, long-term relationships. And so I would like to welcome up the guest for this session, who I still call Uncle Phillip.
Hello, Andi. How are you?
Good. Long time no see.
Yeah. Of course, we've been talking, but now we see each other and everybody else. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, it's really great to see you again. So this is some sort of reunion after a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, I've been super inspired to learn of just the step-by-step progress of your life, your relationships, your blessing, your just so many good things happening, and just having a chance to spend the few months that we did kind of learning about you and your story and your experience, and watching you invest so much in personal growth, in healing and resolving any challenges that were in front of you, and learning from your experience. I'm excited for you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I mean, I had a really good guide and mentor in you. And so I'm excited to get into this because I still refer people back to you. You might have been busy with people who I recommend.
I am currently aware of a couple people that you sent my way. Yeah, I'm working with a couple people you sent my way. That's true.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess there's none better than you to explain what it is that you do. And
Sure.
yeah, how would you describe your work?
Well, it's interesting. I do want to make a point, because the majority of
Yeah.
people that are listening may not know that I, was a missionary and pastor, and worked on the national level and with the Blessed Family Ministry for more than
Mhm.
40 years, right? And developed more and more of an awareness that spiritual frameworks and inspiration and guidance and activity and service and all of these things are powerful and core, But sometimes when we run into barriers or we're facing situations that we can't overcome emotionally, it's affecting our relationships or motivation, or then it kind of helps to look deeper. And I learned that in working with families and couples and young people. So for the last 10 years, I took that kingdom building effort on the global level,
Mm,
right? I
mm,
began focusing on the kingdom within each person, the kingdom that Jesus
mm,
said is within. And so I work as a therapist, a counselor, and a coach. And as a therapist, it means I'm helping people learn about and connect with the emotional roots and reasons that may be behind or driving the things that are blocking them from going forward in life. And most people, think, oh, therapies for, weak or broken or
mm,
difficult people. But usually, if somebody can't move their life forward, if they can't go where they want to go or can't live up to the things that they want to, and there's some emotional barriers or blocks, it's courageous to take a look at that and work with that. As a
mm,
counselor, I'm also providing research-based psychological tools and techniques and science-based neurobiology and information and frameworks that people can use to work on themselves. And as a coach, helping to support um, replacing unhealthy compulsive behaviors with authentic connection, clear idea of where I'm going, and just to
mm,
be able to pull up some weeds and plant some new seeds. That's basically what I do.
mm. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, it is true. It maybe not everybody is aware, but for the people listening, there's a really strong common base that you have, especially with people in the unificationist community. And I found that to be well, very helpful, right? Because there was a lot of understanding for my background, because I was very active, am very active still in our community. And so that was very helpful to feel understood in many details, many aspects.
Yeah.
So I guess a next question to go a little deeper is because there are so many different approaches, I think, to this kind of work. Some people just go to streak trackers or join an online community to get off whatever unwanted habit they have, or different sorts of therapy.
hmm
So, what would you, how would you explain is your approach to this kind of work?
Okay. Well, I do want to mention that maybe 75, 80% of my clients are not from the unification community. And
Mm,
I'm not focusing on a religious framework per se. I
mm,
found that I work with all kinds of spiritual frameworks, and
yeah.
but combining that with an emotional approach. Um, Usually the things that people come to me to talk about. This was
Mm,
the two most common are, compulsive behaviors of all kinds, usually sexually compulsive behavior. Now, sex is not
mm,
an evil. Sex is a God-given, beautiful uh, 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 experience that realizes a lot of things. But when anything becomes compulsive, which means I can't
mm,
not do it, it's occupying my time, it's pulling me from important things. And the number one thing that human beings do all over the world compulsively is our relationship with food. Maybe that's because it's so accessible, right? But we eat
mm,
emotionally. There's all kinds of issues with food compulsively. And so what I do is to try and understand the, you know, emotional roots and reasons that drive that behavior. The number two thing that
mm,
people get compulsive with usually is sex, because it's portable and available to
mm,
us at any moment, right? We're walking around with all the equipment we need, right? But and
mm. Right here.
um, yeah, and then comes substances, whether that's alcohol or drugs or any other kind. But now in this internet era, many things become compulsive. Social media can become something that is a
mm,
replacement for an authentic emotional need, but it's kind of imitating that need through something that's artificial and not necessarily real. And it's more about pleasure than it is about connection. And that's usually what compulsive behaviors are about. We're trying to fulfill our need for bonding, belonging, self
mm,
worth and identity, feeling seen, feeling connected, which brings a deeper sense of contentment and happiness. And we're trying to fulfill that need with pleasure, which is temporary. It's exciting, feels great for a moment, but it doesn't last. And the more
mm,
we try to use pleasure in order to meet the needs of happiness, and connection and fulfillment, the more difficult it becomes to authentically connect with people, right? So
mm,
uh, so social media can be that way, computer games can be that way. You've heard of a workaholic. That's somebody who
mhm, yeah,
deals with their emotional trouble by wrapping themselves up in work, or a rageaholic. Even the
mm,
hormones of anger and stress can become addictive, can become something your body and brain expect to give back and forth to each other, right? So within the
mm,
spiritual frameworks, I work with particularly the understanding of attachment theory, and
mhm,
understanding how our attachment experiences in childhood, you know
mm,
um, let me digress for a minute, okay? It's not
yeah,
really digressing, it's going to your question. um,
think deeper.
you know, uh, Attachment theory and developmental theories, right? And among all the different developmental theories that there are in psychology, moral development, emotional, relational, one of my favorites, one of the most beautiful, is the four great realms of heart in unification teaching. you know and,
Mm,
and and each realm is for a specific learning about how to bond and connect. And that first
mm,
realm of the heart, children's love, I remember teaching it's about being, learning to be loyal and obedient and faithful.
mhm,
That's true, but it isn't just about disciplining and guiding and teaching and rearing. That
yeah,
is the time, we call it the formative years, where our brain is
mm,
being formed, our emotions are being cultivated. We're learning to associate connection with pleasure. If we don't have connection,
mm,
we learn to find other ways of pleasure. We have a pleasure and reward system, which is what all addictions are about. All addictions are about
mm,
manipulating the pleasure and reward system, and giving
mhm,
ourselves rewards without the accompanying life experiences that normally bring that pleasure, like feeling
mm,
connected, feeling seen, feeling safe, feeling loved and inspired. Right? Did you know that
yeah,
the brain scan of somebody on methamphetamines?
mhm,
I think I'm trying to remember the name of the specific methamphetamine. I'm not that well versed, but the brain scan of
mhm,
somebody on methamphetamines looks just like the brain scan of somebody in love. We have a whole
mm,
pharmacy inside. And I'm not saying our brain determines our behavior. No, our physical
mm,
body reflects our spirit and our heart and our character and deeper things. But these
mm,
things manifest, this way. So that first realm of the heart is the most important thing, is that a young person ideally is meant to grow in an environment of unconditional love, right? That's the ideal.
mm,
No parents are perfect. Nobody can, even in the most faithful, loving, supportive, connected families, we all experience challenges. And there are times when our world isn't always safe and it isn't always loving, right? But that
mhm,
period of unconditional love, that period of childhood, we call it formative also because we're forming our self worth, our self
mm,
identity, our confidence, our sense that we're safe and loved, our ability to be creative, to be courageous, to be resilient, all of that is rooted in that first realm of the heart. So
Mm.
there's that, and then the other side is attachment theory. You know,
Mm.
attachment is everything, right? Even if you look from an evolutionary point of view, right?
Mm.
Um, uh, up until birds, up until reptiles, right? Attachment had no meaning, right? A turtle lays
Mm.
200 eggs. You know, predators take 193 of them, and 7 survive, and that's how the species continues, right? But once you get
Yeah.
into mammals, and then ultimately humans, attachment is the way we survive. And human beings, being, you know, conscious, creative, image of God, y- uh, we are born the most fragile and vulnerable, the most dependent, and we have the longest period of needing that attachment with our caregivers in order to develop on
Mm.
so many levels. So attachment theory, it's really interesting. It began from observing children. There was one, you know,
Mm.
famous experiment, strange experience where a child would be placed in
Mm.
a room with its mother. This was back in the
Mm.
1950s. Um, a child would be placed in the room with its mother, and then they would experiment. If a stranger would come in, how the child reacts. If the parent would go out and the stranger's in, how the child would react.
Mm.
And they began to observe that maybe half or less of children are secure enough to deal with those situations without being scared, or to be curious, to be open. But they began to
Mm.
see different types, and they could connect it to the child's experience, how close or not close, if they had both caregivers at home or not. And later,
Mm.
amazing experiment. And this is a really important one, and I'll finish here, although I want to say more about attachment and its importance for us. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, this experiment, probably many of our listeners have seen it, called the
Mm.
still face experiment. And it was just a mother would be present with her 1 to 2 year old infant, responding,
Mm.
smiling, cooing back and forth, and the child's getting excited. And then the parent was told to just turn away, come back, and stop responding. Stop
Mm.
responding. And within 2 minutes, you can watch the baby try every strategy in the world to be a pleaser, right? Ooh, try to be funny, try to be cute, or to get
Yeah.
angry, to disconnect, to turn away. And, you know, so what happens when we grow up in a household where my parents are faithful, loyal, sincere, doing their best, making money, but, you know, dad's always away at work, or
Mm.
mom is always doing, you know, is a missionary, or as I was overseas in Africa and in Southeast Asia, and you know I wasn't at all my daughter's basketball games and wasn't always there for my kids, and so
Mm.
these things have a bigger impact than we might realize. Everybody can
Mm.
recognize if parents abandon their child at the fire station, right? That's going to be a trauma, and
Yeah.
that's going to affect the child's way of relating to the world. But what about a parent that isn't physically present? What about a parent who dies? What about somebody who's learned to deal with their life by being emotionally withdrawn? And so
Mm.
their child is looking for connection. There's all kinds of subtle ways, and it's not about blaming parents. Nobody will heal or resolve by looking at themselves as a victim of somebody else
Mm.
did this to me. In fact, a lot of people are stuck there, right? You know, a lot of
Mm.
kids who grew up in our faith community also struggle if it that with their upbringing and can't resolve. And so working through these difficult things, you can't change the past, you can't change people that may have acted in a way that hurt or limited you, but you can change the way you learned to manage or cope with your life.
Mm.
I hope there's some clarity somewhere in there. What I
Yeah. Thanks. There's a lot there. I mean, it probably, this is a culmination of years of study, right? That you summarized in these
Yeah, and
10 minutes.
you probably didn't want it all in 10 minutes, right? So, but
Yeah. But I mean, I remember myself seeing this video of the experiment that you were talking about, the
still
still
face.
phase.
Yeah,
Yeah, the still phase in my introduction to psychology, something class, and it has huge like meaning, right, for how important um, attachment and connection is for a human being
right,
from birth, basically, and it really determines who we become or who we turn out to be in our adult years, right?
right.
Um, yeah, and I remember that you mentioned one point that me personally, that was a important point when I mean, to the people listening, and so I was in mentorship under you, like I think we were for for 10 months.
Hmm.
And at one point, I remember one thing that came up was going into my childhood experiences, right, with my parents and what came
Right,
up there. And I do have to say, I want to make the point that I have wonderful parents, right? To everybody listening,
right,
they're great parents, and as you said, just not all the things that happen work out perfectly. And so um, at one point, I made the not really mistake, but it was more like a phase of, and I think many people go through this phase of blaming their parents. Oh, it's my parents' fault that I am like this now, or I have to deal with this addiction or habit or behavior, whatever it is. And I remember that you made it a very clear point in one of our sessions that actually it's not, in a sense, for my life, it's not about my parents. It's about who I became in order to cope with whatever experience
right,
I had that upset me and stressed me out,
right,
or made me angry or sad.
right.
So yeah, this is like really addressing the topic of this session, right? That like unwanted sexual habits, porn, but so many other that you mentioned
Hmm.
are in a way all belong to this pool of symptoms
Right.
originating, yeah, from our childhood experiences. And yeah.
One of the most important lessons I've learned in these last 10 years of focusing on, working with individuals and couples, and I also work with families. A lot of people come to
Mm,
me wanting to build a healthier, better relationship with their parents or their children, or there's a conflict because the young person's life goals are going against what their parents want for them, and
mm,
you don't work that out by imposing your will or blaming the other, or how to work through that. But one of the most
mm,
important things I've learned is that every one of the areas of challenge that we face in life has
mm,
has been affected by our attachment experiences growing up. And
mm,
like you said, it doesn't mean that my parents were bad or violent or horrible, or but the fact is, no parents are perfect. Nobody gave a manual to parents, right? There is a manual in the unification tradition, like live for the sake of others. Okay, great. When you're in a
yeah,
fight and you want to do one thing and your spouse wants to do something else, how do you live for how do you make that work? So
yeah, yeah.
figuring those things out, and our parents entered into marriage, blessing, parenting, with their own wounds, their own unmet needs,
Mhm,
and that creates a certain way of coping. Many times I've seen that uh, 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 say a dad who
mhm,
grew up in a family that was hurtful and difficult, then he joins the movement, he changes his life and says, well, my past is not important. I've been born anew. I've got true parents. I've got all this stuff going on. I don't I don't
mhm,
even worry about the past. And yet he may have adapted to that painful environment. A difficult, aggressive, or critical or angry parent may have learned to withdraw and be emotionally closed. And then he's not able to be emotionally available for his children. It doesn't mean he doesn't work hard and do his best, and nobody's trying to blame. This is not about blame, as you said.
mhm,
um, but
yeah,
being able to revisit and to recognize and to learn to deconstruct, though, because what happens is We're growing up in a
Mm.
situation that isn't ideal, so we adapt, right? We don't think, oh, my
Mhm.
parents are bad. We don't think, oh, we think, well, if I'm not getting that much attention, maybe I don't deserve it. Maybe I'm not worth it. Children tend to self-blame.
Mm.
And then we adjust, we adapt in order to try to be safe or loved. And if we don't feel loved, we want attention, or we want sympathy, or we want to please, or we want to perform at school, or we want to do something that will, you know,
Mm.
and even growing up in a religious community with high standards and expectations can also lead to trying to find my value from by performing according to those standards. It doesn't mean the standards are wrong, doesn't mean the community's
Mhm.
bad, but this is quite a common experience growing up in those things. So it always
Mm.
helps.
Hello! Have you ever wondered, could I join a program to help with marriage preparation that's free, that's international, that includes the principle and our true parents' teachings, and includes the element of sharing with other brothers and sisters my age, that we can grow together? Have you ever wondered that? Oh man, I'm wondering that too. Wait a minute, there is a program you can join. You can join the core program for singles. You have to sign up here on the link highnoon.org, and that will take you to the registration, which is limited, by the way, for the core program, which is run by the High Noon team. This program will hopefully show you how to prepare well for the blessing and to learn God's vision for marriage, sex, and intimacy. I hope to see many of you there. Take care.
People don't usually do this work unless they're stuck, right? Can't move forward with my life. My struggles make it, like for many people with High Noon, I don't want to go
Mm.
into a committed, blessed relationship while I am not able to authentically connect with a real, loving, intimate relationship. And I'm wrapped up in all these other things, right? And so they want to resolve those things before they move forward.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, yeah, those are really, really good points. I mean, I remember that was exactly why I went into these sessions with you because I knew, okay, I want to get into communication with a potential future spouse, and generally looking back, I could see that there were many patterns in my life with women, right, again and again and again because of certain experiences from my childhood that I was able to unravel step by step by having these experiences come up again and letting them flow and allowing myself to feel the emotion. And yeah, so
I want to say a couple things about first is
yeah.
what is in common about all addictions and compulsions, where they come from,
Mhm.
why doing some deeper digging can be useful. You can as I did first. Yeah, let me tell you about
Mhm.
before puberty. My go-to, in my complicated dysfunctional family experience growing up, right?
Mm.
Prior to puberty, prior to becoming a sexual person, food was my best emotional friend, right? And I ate my
Mm.
feelings. I remember coming home from school and polishing off, lots of food. And after puberty,
Yeah.
masturbation was my go-to, right? And
Mm.
I'll be very frank, and it was extremely compulsive. And some people out there know how many times in a particular day. I'm sorry, I don't mean to gross anybody out, but it was very
Mhm.
compulsive. Then at 18, I hear the principle. I change my life. I get focused, and just being in a public situation, and my mind going toward God and going toward serving and
Mm.
going toward a situation outside myself. I'm making a four position foundation. I'm going toward the higher purpose, and then my body's following me. So guess what? I had no such problem for months and months and months. But then you get
Mm.
into a different situation. You're alone. You're pioneering. You're by yourself. You're sick. You stay home a day. You're at night. You're idle. Now your mind's not going that way. And so your body kind of says, "Psst, you're not busy. come here, I want to show you something. I got something interesting. You want to come find out? And now all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're being pulled in the other direction. So I did, back in those days, the guidance of my elders, the accountability, have somebody to report to. I'm marking off calendars. How many days am I not? I'm using cold showers. I'm using mind body principles. But when I understood, and I don't have time to go into the story, but when I understood that what I was doing was temporary and was always going to end up disappointing me, always going to end up being fake, being incomplete and not real, and that I realized I had to turn inward. And so it became that kind of thing. Now, all compulsive behaviors have certain things in common, right? Certain things in common. Um, it's the use of pleasure or comfort or the system that was also God given, the pleasure and reward system. Dopamine, dopamine's not just about pleasure. If we didn't have that reward system, our ancestors wouldn't have crossed mountains or endured slavery or gone through all the trials of life with motivation and hope. And so it's a very powerful system. But pleasure is important, but also happiness and contentment and fulfillment is not the same thing. People think you can be happy with pleasure, but they're two important but different things. Pleasure is temporary, happiness is lasting. Pleasure is based in the body and brain, and happiness is ethereal, it's internal, it's something you feel on the inside. Pleasure is a self-centered experience, even if you're doing it with other people. And happiness is always about connecting and being understood and feeling and bonding and expressing. And now again, we need both. We need both. There's nothing bad there, but all addictions have the quality of I'm pushing my pleasure and reward button over and over and over to try and make myself feel better, and it's not lasting, right? And if you actually look, and some of the stuff that we learned was how, when we were working together, is how,
Yeah.
your attachment experiences in childhood affect what you need, the legitimate needs that aren't met. And so we try to meet them, and we can easily sexualize them and fantasize about them. And we not only sexualize our unmet needs. For example, all of my fantasies and my there's a great word in the divine principle. What is it called? Not predispositions. It'll come to me. My brain's getting old.
Inclinations.
My 70-year-old brain doesn't work well. Um, uh, Proclivities. It's in the chapter 2 of the principle. The things that I'm
Okay.
attracted to are a reflection of the legitimate needs for love and bonding that weren't met fully, and I'm now trying to meet them, or wounds that haven't been healed. I mean, you can actually look at all the natures of our fantasies, all the classes of porn, all of the types of fetishes, and they're all a roadmap to our emotional experiences of childhood. And this is not just for people who are struggling. Our attachment experiences affect who we're attracted to. Why do we keep being attracted to the same people? Why do people think my marriage isn't working? I'm not connecting with this person. It must be I've married the wrong person. Who chose this person for me? They must have done a bad job, And then and so we either end the relationship with divorce, or we try to seek pleasure outside with infidelity. That doesn't solve the problem. You divorce from that person, you're going to find the same patterns repeating that are a reflection of my attachment style and my coping style. It's very profound. For example, why would someone, and I'm going to get a little graphic, stop me if this is horrible, but why would somebody, there's a class of pornography and fantasies and fetishes called sadism. Why would someone be aroused by being urinated on or being pooped on. And if anybody out there feels this, I'm not criticizing you, but let's
Mm.
explore that.
Yeah.
You'll always find in not sadism, masochism I'm talking about, where if somebody wants to experience
Yeah.
pain or these kinds of things, you'll always find some background experience of a lack of self-worth. It's amazing
Mm.
how we sexualize even. There's a whole class of porn where men get aroused watching their wives, and I apologize to this lovely, faithful, beautiful audience, but where men get aroused
Mm.
watching their partners be satisfied by another man, that they and feeling less, feeling like they can't do it. But that's connected to an emotional
Mm.
experience that we're reliving or a wound that we're trying to heal. Uh, and and sex is so accessible, and it's often, and you can pretty much go through the different, and even if you look at your own fantasies, right?
Mm.
Oftentimes we fantasize what we don't have hope of realizing in our life. We fantasize that we're loved. We fantasize that someone's giving me attention.
Mm.
And if that person is of the opposite gender or the same gender, it's not because it's genetic or inborn or given by heaven. It's a compulsion arising from unmet needs and unhealed wounds. And it's not an issue of this or that gender orientation. It's a human experience. We all go through this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And understanding this is really can be such a game changer for people, right? Which is the point of uh, this session, that the problem itself is not just that I am acting out my bad habit or that I just need to stop the behavior right now. Of course, that is part of it, but I think myself included, when I started getting into, I want to recover my sexual
Mhm.
integrity and abstinence, sobriety, and just yeah, get away from it and try all the methods and trackers and cold charts conditions. That it's not and feeling extra weird, right? If maybe I'm weird, maybe I'm a freak, or something's just was wrong with me from the beginning, right? If we find ourselves fantasizing or seeking something that is out of the norm, whatever we define
Mhm.
that to be, right?
Mhm.
Or society defines that to be.
Right.
That actually has roots in our experiences and how attachment formed when we were young, right? And what I guess happened to be around us and fulfill that need when we needed it and it wasn't fulfilled.
Right. Right.
And
I thank you for bringing that up, Andy, because I
mm,
wouldn't want anybody to think that I'm speaking out of judgment or criticism or shame or
yeah.
shaming. Shame is always a big part of compulsive activity, particularly compulsive
Mm,
sexuality, right? And shame, the feeling of being unworthy or being less, is a useless emotion. I mean, there is some roots in our authentic self-protective. There are reasons why human beings have the capacity to feel, I can't do this, I'm not enough, I need help, I need my caregivers. Those are natural original feelings. But when we experience that I'm less as a man, less as a
mm,
son or daughter, less as a human being, insecure, not worthy, and less, that is almost always a part of the cycle of acting out. And I went
mm,
from years ago teaching that, masturbation is a sin and you're going to hell, right? And there's a
yeah.
meaning in understanding healthy and unhealthy behavior and the results of, but learning that is not useful in resolving the problem, especially when someone feels unworthy and blaming
Mm,
themselves. And also we have the illusion that everybody else's life is going amazing and they're all doing great things and I'm the one who can't, you know we're comparing our behind the curtain rehearsal self to
mm,
everybody else who's on stage. And I don't mean they're being fake, but I mean we don't see that they're going through their list of challenges and difficulties just like I am.
mhm, mhm.
And shame is not
Yeah.
useful in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. And that's such a big part of so many cultures, right? That there's a black and white thinking. But yeah, when I realized that, and I have my history with unwanted habits, that it could have been a different habit actually, if it just happened to be different circumstances. Instead of porn, it could have been alcohol or gaming or a combination of all of those.
Right.
And that I can work on those individually, right? So in a separated way. But that addressing the root is definitely something very necessary to win the game, right? Overall.
Right.
And sometimes I guess, oh, it's about losing a fight here and there, perhaps, but winning the overall war by addressing whatever has been unmet in me. Those were, for example, experiences that, for me personally, taught me that I can't be angry or sad in public. Um,
Mm.
and so that is something I had to seek out somewhere else, a need, right? An emotional need that turned out to
That's
come up in, yeah,
That's a very, very good point. How that became expressed in your
yeah.
fantasy life, et cetera, et cetera. Right? That's really interesting. And groups like High Noon, and there's also
Mm,
Husband Material and a bunch of other really good groups. But a group like High Noon can successfully help somebody resolve these things because they're providing not just education and information, but support, social connect, a lot of the elements that we need in order to resolve these things are there. But simply speaking, if you are stuck and the habit is still dominating you, it's good to dig a little deeper, right? and i
mhm,
and I was starting to say before, you mentioned about, how you had to stifle or suppress your angry feelings, and it had to come
mm,
out somewhere. One
yeah.
probably the most powerful among the most powerful lessons that I've learned is it's not only in compulsive behaviors with pleasure based substances that we can be compulsive. Mental health issues are also a compulsive way of dealing with how we experience detachment. For example, somebody that grows up, and I've had this over and over again with clients, right? Um, Someone that had a reason to suppress or depress their
Mm,
emotions, right?
yeah.
Maybe, hey, a good Catholic would never be angry. You shouldn't be angry. A good blessed child should
Mm,
behave like this. Why are you being upset? Or if there's a strong reaction, or if I get angry, my caregivers get more angry, and I become afraid of that.
mm,
If I've had a reason to depress, suppress, and push down my emotions, it can be one root of depression, right? Because with
mm,
emotions, there's only a master volume. You can't turn down the negative ones and keep the positive ones. All it affects my emotional world. Anxiety, right? As- uh, Anxiety,
mhm,
when feeling unsafe, feeling threat, feeling insecure. There's a bodily reaction that's part of anxiety, and also another thing that our childhood experiences teach us, it's not just the emotional impact, but they teach us to believe things about ourselves and about others and about the world. Am I worth anybody's time?
mm,
Does anybody truly love me? Can I trust? Can I respect or love authority, respond to authority? All of these things. And so unhealthy beliefs and a sense of threat or fear, the fight, flight, freeze
mm,
response, are usually what anxiety is about. So I'm not a psychiatrist and I don't prescribe medication, but some common
mhm,
forms of mental health struggles, fears,
mm,
barriers, anxiety, lack of confidence, the obsessive thinking, things like this. I also often end up helping clients through those kinds of things as well.
mm. Yeah, yeah, that is really helpful to know, I think. So I think maybe a question that, and we have maybe 5, 6, 7 more minutes, that I think would be worthwhile getting into is what um, what would be some helpful tools for people, I guess, in a brief summary, to get into this healing process from whatever happened in childhood and healing from that and growing in the adult years and adult life.
Hmm. Well, a lot of times, if it depends on the type of situation, but some of the, you know,
Mm,
a lot of times you'll have somebody who's a therapist, or well, first of all, you'll have, say, a psychiatrist who many in the medical community assume that when somebody's dealing with anxiety or attention deficit disorder, or these kinds of things, that it's brain based on brain
mm,
chemistry, and it's an inherited situation. But actually, you can find roots in the attachment experience. For example, kids
mm,
who grow up who are orphaned or homeless or living, or single parent families, which is not to accuse or blame single parents who do an amazing job, but anyone who's
mm,
growing up in a more unstable, dysregulating environment, 5 times more tendency to ADHD, 5 times more diagnosis, right?
mm,
Because
mm,
if the situation, I'm constantly in stress or in anger or struggle or frustration, I have to I have to protect myself from it somehow, and it
mm,
becomes a go-to mechanism. So um, some of the kinds of tools, a lot of times therapists will approach with one, okay, cognitive therapy, dialectical behavioral. I kind of
mm,
use eclectic tools to address unhealthy beliefs or self-defeating, or shame is a really tough one, right? But unhealthy beliefs
mm,
about myself, there are cognitive techniques to learn to recognize, expose the lie, affirm the truth, and change my thinking, right? And so teaching people how to do that is one important thing. Um, on
mm,
the other hand, if somebody, for example, is filled with shame or is feeling insecure and inadequate, and struggling, who would ever want to marry me, or why do I always, why am I always with the nerdy group, or whatever they might have experienced, um,
mm,
there's three powerful sources of love and value, right, in the universe,
mm,
right, and of unconditional love. And the first and most important is the only truly unchanging unconditional love in the universe, which is God. And so a spiritual life will be helpful, but then
mm,
also having, it doesn't mean I have to go back and resolve everything with my parents if it's difficult, but having parental mentors is something that changed my life
mm,
in the midst of my spiritual life. It changed my life, having people that I looked up to, trusted, that could guide, inspire, and fill my cup and motivate
mm,
and inspire me. And a third very important source is my own inner capacity to love. It's the most love myself, right? I don't
mm,
mean
mm.
self-love like spa days and taking care of me instead of everybody else. I mean the kind
Cucumbers
of,
and that.
yeah, the kind of the kind of affirmation that comes when I know I'm safe and loved by my caregivers.
Mm,
One of the founders of psychotherapy said, "Successful therapy is when you learn to give yourself what your parents weren't able to." Right? It's not about
mm,
changing them or going back to the past or holding on to resentment or any of those things. But sometimes we need to go and allow ourselves to experience a developmental need, an emotional developmental need or other, that was missed. And there are ways of doing that. Memory healing, inner child work, all of these things. These are not just like fancy schmancy new age things. The inner
mm,
child is just a framework of being able to get in touch with how I experienced my vulnerable pre-adolescent years, and how can I learn, heal, acknowledge, and give myself the support, safety, compassion, and love. And so there are cognitive techniques, mindfulness techniques.
mm.
There are neurobiological techniques. Do you know that the right kind of breathing is more powerful than anti-anxiety medication? And I use it myself, and I taught you some of these things too. So that's a little bit
Mhm. Yeah.
of those are a few things.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, of course, in the time it's impossible to get into everything that's there and how it works exactly, but those are the things I remember we did as well. Kind of going
Yeah,
through approaching inner child healing and some cognitive behavioral um, exercises with which both were very powerful in their own way and
yeah,
complementary. And then I think a bunch of other exercises.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, uh,
yeah.
if I can also, I think my experience with unification principle was super
Hmm.
important because the principle understands that we have an original, authentic, divine, original self, right? Which means,
Hmm.
and even if you listen to Father's theories on education, if you look at his guidance on education, it's all inside you. Right? It doesn't have to be put
Hmm.
in from the outside. It needs to be cultivated from inside. So, from that
Yeah.
standpoint, we have all the capacity and power within us, and learning how to cultivate and affirm and express those things. On the other side, we have a fallen or false or wounded or unhealthy self. And so some, therapeutic understanding, tools to heal, to resolve, to break through barriers, to learn different behaviors, to overcome fears. Um, and so we use lots of different techniques applicable to the situation, even how to make healthy boundaries, communicate effectively,
Mm.
communication skills, assertiveness skills, depending on each person's story, and even just the self understanding that someone can gain from looking compassionately and with wisdom at their own journey and story. They can
Mm.
learn, realize, and let go of so much.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Thank you so much. There's so much I think that people can learn from this, or I hope that people can learn from this.
Yeah.
Um, and as you said, people can learn from their own story. Like, I mean, there are many quotes. Looking at your own behavior or your own addiction tells you so much about what it is that you actually are looking for and desiring in life right now.
Right.
And
I think
yeah,
Jay Stringer, who wrote the
right, yeah.
incredible book Unwanted, I take credit for recommending that to High Noon a couple years ago, but might not be me. But Stringer said your adult compulsive sexual behaviors are a roadmap to your wounds, a roadmap to your
Mhm.
childhood experience, your unmet needs or your unhealed wounds. Right.
Mm. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, it's amazing that humanity now is at a point where we are much more aware, at least in our Western society, of all these roots and things, and we can go much deeper than just the surface. Yeah, I think we are at the end of the session already. There would be many more hours, right, worth of covering stuff, but thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Yeah, I apologize if I dove in too deep in this or that area, but I hope the general sense of what your questions, because the theme being that the compulsive activity is a symptom. What's it a symptom of? What are some of the roots? I hope
Mhm.
that we've been able to touch on that a little bit, and I so appreciate you and inviting me here, and wish the best to everybody listening.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. Have a great rest of the day.
Hey, did you know that our team wants to do more events? Well, if you want to bring the High Noon message to your community or group, then let us know and we'll try to work something out. There's a simple application that you can fill out right now at highnoon.org/invite. And one of our team members will get back to you to see what's possible. That's highnoon.org/invite. All right, see you in the next episode.